was supposed to be a celebration, a night to honor my life and the sacrifices I had made. My 50th birthday. But as I sat in the car, parked outside the house, my mind was consumed with anger and humiliation. The evening, which was meant to mark a milestone, had already turned into a nightmare. I sat there, the weight of betrayal heavy on my chest, knowing everything was falling apart right in front of me. For the last 20 years, I had built a life with Emily, my wife, my partner. We had 3 children together and had moved to a nice suburban area in Maple Ridge. Our life had seemed perfect, on the outside at least. But that night, everything changed. It felt like the entire foundation of my world was crumbling, all because of one simple yet devastating truth. I had always worked hard to be a good husband to Emily and a devoted father to my children. I sacrificed time, energy, and my own desires to provide them with everything I thought they needed. I wanted to be a role model, to be the man who showed his kids what it meant to work hard and to love unconditionally. But now, after all those years, it seemed like none of it mattered. That night, everything I had worked for was thrown in my face. The party was supposed to bring us closer together, to remind us of what we had built. It was supposed to be a symbol of our family, our love, our success. But instead, as the video played on the big screen, I saw everything we had built being torn apart. My own children, my flesh and blood, were mocking me. They were laughing at me. The video wasn't a tribute. It was a mockery. They showed clips from years ago. Old photos of me in my worn-out work clothes, videos of my attempts at home improvement projects that had never been completed. And then it escalated. There were moments of my personal life, my mistakes, things that should have stayed private. Emily's voice, mocking me in front of everyone, criticizing me for being distant, for not being the husband or father she expected. But the worst part was at the end, when my kids, who I thought I had raised to be strong, honorable, and respectful, made the announcement. They were changing their last names. They were no longer going to carry my name. They wanted nothing to do with me. I couldn't believe it. It was like a punch in the gut. They had been so eager to distance themselves from me. They didn't care that I had given everything to raise them, to provide for them. I had worked myself to the bone for them, and this is how they repaid me? By shaming me in front of everyone? By taking my name and throwing it away as if it meant nothing? I couldn't stay at that table any longer. I walked out of the party, leaving my family behind, my heart heavy with rage and sadness. The night that was supposed to be about me, about us, had turned into a public humiliation. The next few days were a blur. I didn't want to be around anyone, especially them. I sat in my car for hours, thinking, planning, and stewing in my anger. I couldn't believe how easily they had turned on me, how easily they had used me, and how easily they had thrown me aside like I was nothing. But I wasn't going to let them get away with this. I wasn't the type of man who would sit idly by and let them treat me like this. They would regret what they had done. They would remember how they treated their father, how they publicly humiliated me. I spent the next few days in isolation, thinking about everything, the years I had spent building this life, the sacrifices I had made, and the love I had poured into them. I thought about the times I had stayed up late working on projects for them, the nights I had spent worrying about their futures, and the moments I had given up on my own dreams, just to make sure they had what they needed. But all of it meant nothing. They didn't see it. They didn't appreciate it. They didn't care. I would make them care. I wasn't going to let them get away with treating me like this. They had crossed a line, and now it was time for me to show them what happens when you betray someone who has always had your back. I knew I had to act fast, but I also knew that I had to be strategic. They wouldn't see this coming. I wasn't going to just forgive them. I wasn't going to let them walk all over me. They would feel the weight of their actions, and they would regret every single moment of it. I had no choice now. The time for being passive was over. The time for revenge had come. The next few days were filled with a mixture of anger, reflection, and cold determination. I couldn't bring myself to talk to Emily or the kids. They were living in their own world, and I was nothing more than an afterthought to them. I had worked so hard for them, but it seemed like they had forgotten that. Every day I found myself asking why I had invested so much of myself into a family that clearly didn't care for me the same way. But then, as the days dragged on, a plan began to form in my mind. They had publicly humiliated me, and now it was time for me to take back control. I wasn't going to just sit back and let them enjoy their lives while I wallowed in pain and humiliation. They would learn the hard way that there are consequences to disrespecting the people who sacrifice everything for you. I knew I had to approach this carefully. I couldn't just confront them head-on and expect a different outcome. No, I needed to hit them where it would hurt the most. They would regret everything they had done to me, and I would make sure of that. I started by gathering everything I could: the house, the assets, the finances, everything I had put into this family. I had always been the one to take care of the bills, the mortgage, the education. I had worked day in and day out to make sure they had everything they needed. And now it was time to see how they would fare without me. I called in some of my old contacts, people who owed me favors, people who had seen me work and respected me. I knew I could count on them to help me put my plan into motion. I started arranging things, setting up meetings, and quietly preparing for the day when everything would change. Emily had no idea what was coming. She was still under the illusion that she had control over the situation. She still thought that I was the one who would eventually cave, that I would be the one to apologize and beg for forgiveness. But that wasn't going to happen. No, I was done being the doormat. The kids, they were another story. They had been the ones to really break me. It wasn't just that they had humiliated me. It was that they had shown no respect, no understanding of what I had done for them. They had completely turned their backs on me. So I had to make them understand, make them realize the consequences of their actions. I wasn't going to just ruin their financial stability. No, I would do more than that. I would strip away everything they had taken for granted. I would make them question the very foundation of their lives. The first step was to get the legal stuff in motion. I contacted a lawyer and began the process of selling the house. I knew it was going to be difficult, especially since I had spent so many years building that home, making it a place where they could all feel comfortable. But the house wasn't the real prize. It was just the beginning. I also started to quietly pull the financial strings. I moved money into offshore accounts, closed joint accounts, and started pulling back on the support I had been giving them. I wasn't going to leave them destitute, but I sure as hell wasn't going to let them continue to live off my hard work without facing some consequences. But it wasn't just about money. I knew they were expecting me to cave in, to beg for their forgiveness, but I had no intention of doing that. No, I wanted to hit them where it hurt the most: their pride, their reputation, and their sense of security. I began to build my own new life. A life where I wasn't burdened by their expectations, their demands, and their disrespect. I started going to the gym again, meeting new people and building connections. Slowly, I was putting together the life I had always wanted but had sacrificed for them. And then the moment arrived. I had everything in place. The house was listed, the finances were in motion, and my plan was ready to go. It was time for them to face the consequences of their actions. They had humiliated me, but now they would see just how much they had lost. And when they did, when they realized that everything they had taken for granted was slipping through their fingers, they would finally understand the weight of their betrayal. The day I called them for a meeting came sooner than even I expected. By then, the house in Cedar Hill had already attracted 2 buyers, the accounts were separated, and every financial tie between us was either severed or hanging by a thread. I sent a short message into the family chat. "We need to talk. Come to my place on Saturday. All of you." No emojis, no explanations, just a simple order. And they came. Of course they came. Because for the first time in their lives, they felt something was slipping out of their hands. Something they always assumed was eternal. My support. I heard a knock earlier than expected. When I opened the door, it was Emily. She looked like she hadn't slept in days, her blonde hair messily tied back, her eyes swollen. She stepped inside without a word, as if she still lived there. I didn't stop her. Not yet. Soon after, the boys arrived. First Grayson, then Milo, and finally Archer. All 3 looked drained. All 3 avoided eye contact. All 3 were about to learn how it feels to sit on the other end of humiliation. "Sit," I said, coldly. They obeyed without a fight. That alone told me everything. I walked to the projector I'd set up the night before. The living room lights dimmed automatically. A blank screen lit up the wall. Grayson frowned. "Dad, what is this?" "You'll see," I replied and clicked the remote. The slideshow began. First slide, a spreadsheet. My spreadsheet. A detailed record of every payment I'd ever made for them. Tuition, rent, cars, repairs, trips, bailouts, debt consolidation, phone bills, insurance, gas money, grocery money, each line with dates, amounts, and attached receipts. A lifetime of support. Their eyes widened. Milo leaned forward, squinting. Archer let out a shaky exhale. "What is this supposed to mean?" Archer muttered. "That," I said, "is your childhood and adulthood, funded by me. Every cent, every sacrifice." Grayson tried to laugh it off. "Dad, is this some kind of—" "Shut up." The words left my mouth calmly, steadily, and it shocked all of them into silence. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't emotional. I was simply done. Slide 2. Screenshots of missed payments after I stopped covering their expenses. Grayson's overdue rent. Milo's tuition warning from St. Adrian University. Archer's unpaid credit card balance. Slide 3. Recordings of voice messages. Their own angry voices demanding money from me as if it were their right. Slide 4. Emily's texts to her sister. Messages trashing me. Calling me boring, useless, pathetic, emotionally flat, financially predictable. Screenshots time-stamped during nights she told me she was working late. Emily gasped and covered her mouth. The boys turned to her slowly, their faces tightening. I kept clicking through the slides. Slide 5. A message from Archer, sent to his fiancée Hazel. He had blamed me for his inability to help with the wedding costs. He had conveniently left out that he spent the wedding fund on sports betting. And I had proof, screenshots of his gambling transactions. Hazel had dumped him that week. Now he understood why. "Dad," Archer whispered, his voice breaking. But I wasn't done. Next slide. Milo's academic record. He had failed 2 classes and begged me not to tell his mother. I showed the emails from his professors. I showed the times I had paid for his makeup credits. Milo's face turned pale. Next slide. Grayson's past due mortgage and the messages from his wife Sierra asking why the payments weren't going through. I had canceled my automatic transfers right after the restaurant meeting. I had every right to. Grayson swallowed hard and rubbed his face. He knew he was in trouble. Finally, the last slide appeared. A family built on lies. Emily stood up abruptly. "This isn't fair, Leo. You're twisting." I clicked again. A new slide. A set of photographs. Her and Oliver Ward, the overly fit cross-training instructor from her gym, arms around each other, leaving a hotel, laughing in his car. Her entering his apartment at midnight. Time-stamped, geotagged, undeniable. The room went silent, then explosive. "Mom?" Milo's voice cracked. "You said Dad was paranoid," Archer whispered. "You lied to us," Grayson said, shaking his head. Emily tried to speak, but her words dissolved into choked breaths. I turned off the projector. "Now," I said quietly, "you finally understand what humiliation feels like." I walked to the center of the room, standing tall, calm, and strangely at peace. "I'm selling the house," I said. "My name is already removed from all financial responsibilities connected to you. I'm changing my last name back to my mother's maiden name, Rowden. And going forward, I will not be funding your lifestyles, your mistakes, or your carelessness." Milo stood. "Dad, you can't just—" "I can. And I am." Grayson clenched his jaw. "You're punishing us for one stupid joke." "It wasn't a joke," I said. "It was a choice. And this," I gestured at them, "is the result." Archer wiped his eyes. "So that's it? You're done with us?" "No," I answered. They all looked up. Hope flickered. "I'm done saving you." Their hope died instantly. Emily, still trembling, whispered, "So you're abandoning your family." I looked at her, really looked at her. This woman I had loved for half my life. This woman who had thrown me to the wolves and watched it happen. "No," I said. "I'm finally choosing myself." The room fell into a stunned, breathless quiet. And for the first time in years, I felt powerful, whole, alive. When I walked out of that living room, leaving them stunned and speechless, I expected to feel guilty. Some part of me assumed I would break down in the hallway, maybe sit in my truck and cry like I had after the restaurant incident. But instead, I felt light. My steps were steady, my breathing calm. My shoulders, once permanently hunched under the weight of responsibility, relaxed for the first time in years. It was like I'd finally cut loose a ship that had been dragging me underwater. I got into my car, turned the ignition, and drove away without looking back. No one followed me. They were too busy dealing with the shock wave I had just detonated. That evening I messaged Audrey. She wasn't a romantic partner at the time, not yet. She was a hiking buddy I'd met months earlier at a community event in nearby Silverwood Park. We'd shared casual conversations about nature, travel, and life after Heartbreak. She never judged me. She never asked for anything, she simply listened. When I texted her, "You free?" she replied within seconds, "Meet me at Pine Ridge Overlook." I drove there immediately. The sun was setting when I arrived, the sky painted deep orange and purple over the cliffs and winding river below. Audrey stood by the railing, hair pulled into a loose braid, wearing a simple sweater and jeans. She smiled when she saw me, not out of obligation, or pity, or expectation, just genuine warmth. "You look lighter," she said softly as I approached. "I am," I admitted. We walked along the trail, talking about everything except my family. She didn't push. She didn't pry. She let me breathe. Eventually, she stopped, turned toward me, and asked, "So what now, Leo?" I looked out over the valley. "Now," I exhaled. "Now I live." She smiled, touched my hand briefly, and we continued walking as the sky darkened and the first stars appeared. For the first time in decades, I felt free. The fallout came fast. The very next morning, Grayson called me 7 times. Then he switched to texts. Long paragraphs filled with frustration, warnings, accusations. He claimed Sierra was furious about the missed mortgage payments. He accused me of sabotaging his marriage. I didn't respond. By afternoon, Milo sent screenshots of his university threatening to suspend him for unpaid tuition. He asked if I could help just this once. Again, I didn't reply. Later that night, Archer called, sobbing. Hazel had officially broken off the engagement. Her parents had seen the gambling records I sent her privately. He told me I'd ruined his future. I stared at the screen as his voice cracked through the voicemail, then calmly deleted the message. They wanted consequences without accountability. They wanted comfort without effort. Not anymore. 2 days later, the first in-person confrontation came. I was packing boxes in the Cedar Hill house, preparing it for the real estate agent, when the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Emily standing there, arms crossed, eyes swollen. "We need to talk," she said. "No," I replied. "You need to accept." She pushed her way inside anyway. "You humiliated me," she snapped, "in front of our children. You destroyed our family." I set down the tape dispenser and looked at her calmly. "I didn't destroy anything. I exposed what was already broken." She flinched. "You could have fixed this," she said, voice trembling. "We could have worked it out." I shook my head. "You cheated, Emily. You lied. You encouraged them to disrespect me. You led that video. You laughed while they tore me apart." She looked away. "That was a mistake," she whispered. "I didn't think—" "No," I interrupted. "You never did. Because you assumed I would always stay, that I would always forgive." Her eyes filled with tears. "So that's it? You just walk away?" "I'm choosing myself," I said again. "And that means walking away from people who only value me when I'm useful." She stared at me for a long moment, then finally asked, "Is there someone else?" I didn't answer. Her silence afterward was heavy. Then she left. Without slamming the door, without yelling, just quietly closing a chapter she thought she controlled. A week later, the house sold. I packed the last of my things, signed the papers, and handed over the keys. All that remained was my truck, a few suitcases, and the open road. I drove north toward Yellowstone, the landscape shifting from suburbs to forests to mountains. Wind through the open window, music playing softly. No demands, no obligations, just possibility. I arrived near the park by evening and checked into a small cabin lodge outside a town called Clearwater Bend. The owner, an older man with kind eyes, handed me the keys and said, "Stay as long as you need. People come here to start over." That night, for the first time in my adult life, I slept peacefully. 3 weeks passed. I hiked, I read, I cooked for myself. I learned to be alone without feeling lonely. Then one afternoon, as I sat outside the cabin, watching elk graze in the distance, I heard footsteps. When I looked up, all three of my sons were standing there. Grayson looked desperate, Milo exhausted, Archer fragile. Behind them stood Emily, her expression hardened by resentment and fear. "Dad," Grayson said quietly, "we need help." They explained everything, the missed payments, the eviction notice, the academic suspension, the broken engagement, the debts piling up. They expected me to step in, to fix it, to save them, just like always. I listened without interrupting. When they finished, silence hung in the mountain air. Then I simply said, "No." Their faces fell simultaneously. "You're our father," Milo whispered. "I was," I corrected. "But I won't be your safety net anymore." They stared at me, stunned. Emily stepped forward. "You're destroying your relationship with your children," she said sharply. I looked at her steadily. "No, you all destroyed it when you decided I was only valuable as a wallet and a punching bag." She opened her mouth to argue, but I raised a hand. "I love you," I said to the boys. "But love without respect is slavery." Tears filled Archer's eyes. "But we're trying," he said. "Then keep trying," I replied. "On your own." I walked past them toward the trail. "Dad," Grayson called after me. "Please." I didn't turn around. For the first time in my life, I kept walking. Later that evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, my phone buzzed. A message from Audrey. "Dinner at the lodge?" "I made stew." I smiled. "Be there soon." I stood outside my cabin for a moment, breathing in the cold, clean air, listening to the rustle of trees and distant river. My family had walked away defeated. I remained, not triumphant, not vengeful, just free. I whispered to myself, almost in disbelief, "This is what peace feels like." And then I headed toward the warm light of the lodge, toward someone who valued me, not for what I provided, but for who I was. My new life had begun,